day and welcome to today's Conversation podcast. Today I'm privileged to host one of the most important Zambians, a luminary in the legal fraternity. I'm hosting Musa Mwenya, State Counsel. He recently has been in the news over the Anti-Corruption Commission, where he headed the board as chairperson, appointed by President Hakainde Hichilema, ratified by Parliament. And this is not only his only ratified job by Parliament, he has held various senior jobs. Remember, he was Attorney General of the Republic of Zambia and leader of the bar. He was Solicitor General. And prior, he was Law Association of Zambia President. Mr. Musa Mwenya, State Counsel, welcome to today's Conversation podcast. And I'm glad that you found time to come and be with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a privilege, and I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You are in the news for these big things regarding the governance of our country, and you grace the newspaper headlines, you grace our radio and TV broadcasts. And people may not know who Musa Mwenya is because they just see this glorious, successful man, and they don't know where you are from, how you are made, how you were formed, how you came to achieve what you've achieved. Let's walk back. Tell us, who is Musa Mwenya?
Well, I was born in Lusaka, went to school for most of my life in Lusaka, and then gravitated towards the Copper Belt, where I finished my school in Chingola. So I grew up with a single mom. My mom had 3 of us, and my dad had 4 other children. And largely, our mother really shepherded us, taught us certain basics, and we didn't have an easy life growing up. I remember one time my mom couldn't even afford to buy me school shoes, and I had to go in slippers at some point. She used to run a little saloon in the corner of the flat. If you remember those days, even people from humble beginnings under Kaunda would have good jobs, relatively, and they were provided housing. So she used to work for Zambia State Insurance Corporation in the early days, and she would run a little saloon in the corner of the house. And I remember selling scones on her behalf outside on the road, and they were not that good, so I was the one who was insulted for those scones. But that was our humble background. Unfortunately, my mom died when she was only 36. And
how old were you when she died?
I must have been in grade 11 that time, 16.
Yeah.
So she left us, and I finished my grade 12 on the Copper Belt. That's how I moved to live with an uncle. And then my uncle died when just after I'd finished my grade 12, but before I got to university. And from that time, I have really not had any guardian.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was on campus and really didn't have any family guardian. But God has been good. My brother works in a reasonably big company as a financial controller in Melbourne. My sister runs her own business in Perth, and that's on my mom's side. So this single woman left a legacy that has far outlived her.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
So I'm born and bred in Lusaka, but I have roots on the Copper Belt as well.
Your mother will be proud of what you guys have achieved.
No, thank you.
Because looking at the difficult circumstances you've outlined of a single parent raising you and then dying, quite early, and then leaving you to fend for yourself. And in our country, although everyone raises our children, it's difficult to be raised in another home. So, and then your days at the university, how did you afford your university?
Well, fortunately we had sponsorship in those days.
Yeah.
We were bursary students, and even my first spectacles were bought by the government. The first spectacles I ever wore, the government actually funded it through the university. And so that helped me get through school and get educated. And then Ziale was a bit of a problem I remember that it's my father-in-law who paid for my Ziale.
Okay.
Because we were the first people who went to Ziale. LPI had just been phased off, and it's the first time they introduced fees at Ziale, and they were steep.
Yeah.
And I was
because they were commercializing it. And
they were commercializing it, and I was helped. I just got married. I'm one of those unorthodox people who got married at Ziade before I actually qualified. And then we got to. I passed first time. That time we were only 33 in our class, and 11 of us passed at first attempt. So the pass rate was about 30%. But if you recall, we only had one law school in Zambia.
Yeah,
at that time.
true, which was the University of Zambia.
University of Zambia, yeah. So university education
just
was
for
interesting.
context and for people to understand your peers, who are some of the people you're with at university?
My classmates.
Ziale, yeah, some of the people that you can remember.
Supreme Court Judge Jones Chinyama was my classmate. Justice.
I used to call him the tallest lawyer. He became a magistrate, and he tried Dr. Chuluba's cases.
No, he was a very dignified man. Yeah.
Yes.
So we had Judge Musona.
Okay.
He was, Edward Musona was my classmate as well. We had people like Judge Sharon Newa. We have at least 9 judges. Judge Chibabuka.
From your class?
From my class. We had the Administrator General, who was the official receiver of KCM, Celine Nair, was a classmate of mine. We had the current Chairperson of ERB, James Banda, who became my vice president in LAS.
And became president after you.
Yes. James was also a classmate, and there's a whole list of eminent persons who were in my class.
And I noticed that you ran your own law firm with a partner, Mwitwa. Before that, you can speak briefly to your just rise in the profession.
Right. I have only worked for someone for 3 years. I first worked for Justice Charles Kajimanga, and then I left Justice Charles Kajimanga within that same 3-year period to join a firm which was called Sharp and Howard. Then I got called back by Judge Kajimanga to buy him off, so I bought the firm. And
what was the law firm called?
I kept it as Kajimanga.
Okay.
So then Sharp and Howard approached me and offered that we merge the two firms.
Okay.
I remember Judge Nicola Sharp-Piri, who is now Court of Appeal judge, and Mr. Andrew Howard then became my partners, and we formed Sharp, Howard, and Mwenye. So that was the background. So the only other jobs I've held after that are ratifiable jobs. Which really I don't consider jobs, they are service to the nation. So I've been in practice by and large almost the whole of my working life except 3 years. So
wonderful.
Those days you could set up a law firm within 3 years. Now I think it's 5 years.
You were last president. How did you aspire to be last president? What values did you want to bring to the fraternity? And you were quite young to head LAS. I'm glad that the current president, Lungisani, is also a young president, but you had set the bar then.
Right. No, I was relatively young. If you remember, before I became LAS president, I became honorary secretary.
Yes.
And I was honorary secretary when I was only 32, and became Oasis Forum spokesperson. If you recall, that period, Oasis Forum was very powerful, and civil society was very powerful. For those who don't know, Oasis Forum was a civil society umbrella body which came together, and it came together between the church mother bodies, the 3 church mother bodies, the NGOCC, and the Law Association of Zambia to form this pressure group to prevent a 3rd term first. In
2001.
2001, and later on to advocate for constitutional changes. So I became Oasis Forum spokesperson. And of course, during that period when I was only 32, is the first time I clashed with the president. And if you recall, the younger ones won't remember the famous phone call between myself and President Mwamba at that time.
What was his concern with you? Why did he give you that call?
That morning, I had issued a statement in the Post, which was very prominent newspaper that time. And I said, we'll fight President Mwamba over the Constitution. So I think he had just read the paper when he called me directly. So I was naive and young that time, well, relatively naive. But I had a large dose of courage, but not too much knowledge. So anyway, around lunchtime, I was in court in the morning. Around lunchtime, I came out of the courtroom and I found a missed call on this 25 number. So I dialed it back and they told me, no, the president wanted to speak to you. I said, which president? Says the Republican president. I said, put him on the line. Again, that's naivety. That doesn't happen. They said, no, he'll call you back. And for sure, 2 hours later, the phone rang and the president was on the line. And he says, is this Mr. Mwenye? I said, yes, it is. He said, I just called to ask you how you intend to fight me. So, and what was your answer? I said, no. No, I was very forthright with him. I've always been that kind of person. I said, no, you are my president. And you promise certain things and you are not doing them. And sir will fight you for this constitution. Not only are you my president, but you are a leader in our profession.
As a lawyer.
Fortunately for President Mwamba, he listened. He asked me, he said, when did I promise? I said, I have 2 of your speeches. He says, do you have them now? I said, no, I don't. He said, okay, get them, I'll call you back. For sure at 17:50, 18, he called. And I was driving around with these 2 speeches in my car. So I parked at Hilltop Hospital. I hope the owners won't get offended with me using their premises for those activities. So I parked at Hilltop Hospital because I was living in Kablonga then. And he asked me, so when did I promise? So I gave him the time, and you could hear he was writing. I gave him the instances when he promised, and then he said, okay. So the conversation then was whether you could have a national constitutional conference to adopt the constitution. And
the Constituent Assembly, as it was called at the time.
And the arguments were huge against this particular body. He said, no, but how can it be done? So I walked him through. I said, Mr. President, Your Excellency, your government comes up with a government white paper. All we are asking you to do is, instead of the National Constitutional Review Commission submitting to you this to cabinet to come up with a white paper, a wider group should look at it. So we had a very constructive conversation for 1 hour. Then the news started and he said, look, and I was on the news that time. I was 32 years ago, but I was on the 19 hours news and they were talking about the Oasis Forum and the statement I had issued and
the reaction from government.
The reaction from government and then a small clip about what I had said. So he said, oh, they are talking about you, I need to listen to the news. And then I said to him, this is where we differed. I said, Your Excellency, I want to make one point. He says, what's that point? I said, as a matter of integrity, you called me in my capacity as somebody. I'm Honorary Secretary of LAS, and I'm a spokesperson of the Oasis Forum. I'm going to debrief the organizations.
That I received a call from the president.
And I'll brief them in confidence. He said, that's a mistake. You're making a mistake. I said, sir, let's agree to disagree. Now, people who knew the late President Mwamba knew that he liked to write. He wrote me an 11-page letter.
Wow.
That
I hope you have kept it.
I've kept it. I've kept it. And I responded with a 7-page one, which I've also kept. So we had an interesting exchange of ideas. And of course, the headline news came out later on about this famous phone call. So that was when I was 32. Later on,
Secretary of
LAS. And then
2003, I think.
Yes. And then around the time I was 33, 36 or 37, I became chairperson of the Law Association of Zambia. And later on, shortly after that, became state counsel and solicitor general. And then within 2-3 years, I became attorney general. I think so far, it may not be the last. I suspect only 2 of us have held those positions.
Yeah.
And certainly only 2 of us have held all 3 positions. As last president, solicitor
general. Who are the others?
Abudi Shonga.
Abudi Shonga, yes.
Yeah.
State counsel. He was recently last president,
yes.
But he had been state counsel, a solicitor general and attorney general.
Yes,
under
so,
President Rupia Banda, I think.
Yes, so I think those are, if I'm not mistaken.
And who's the other? Is it Honorable Malila?
No. Only me and Abudi have held those positions.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, Justice Malila was attorney general, but never solicitor general.
Okay.
And he was never a law association of Zambia president.
No, we admire your achievements. In fact, for example, you've been very consistent on governance issues. Like you are saying, the Oasis Forum was a very formidable force. I think you rallied the people well. You rallied cooperating partners very well. You became, I think, the voice in which government could be held accountable.
Yes.
And since the days of the Oasis Forum, we haven't seen a formidable civil society in the manner it was marshaled in 2001. It has been there like we saw in 2021, but it's in clusters and, divisions. But my point is, the issue of the constitution and good governance, you've been at it for a long time.
Yes.
What have we done wrong with our constitution? Because it's a debate that never goes away.
It never, but now, we must admit that this current document perhaps is an improvement on all the other documents. But as I discovered when we did the presidential petition, its enforcement and the respect for it is the problem. Yeah, so the document, usually the documents are just as good as the people who enforce them and respect them, yeah. But talking about civil society engagement, what you may want to know is after the Oasis Forum was formed and we defeated the late President Chiluba's third term attempt, we then headed to Malawi under cover of darkness. I don't want to embarrass them, but myself, the current speaker, the Right Honorable Nelly Muti,
yes.
Laura Miti, Bishop Paul Mususu, and the late Ingutu Mutembo,
yes,
and myself went to Malawi.
To our twin sister republic.
Yes, to mobilize against Bakiri Muluzi's third term attempt. And we managed to defeat it there.
Because you went to give them the best practices.
We went to give them the best practices and to marshal them. So we were meeting civil society organizations in the night. And by the time we were leaving, I remember we stayed at a place called Uhuru Gardens.
Yeah.
The owner of Uhuru Gardens came to us and says, had I known what you were doing here,
I wouldn't have given
Early morning at 6, we left Malawi and we're back in Zambia. So it's been a life of speaking when it's not fashionable to do that.
So on our constitution, do you hold the view like government that wants to amend the constitution? There are others that feel that the current constitution must be allowed to breathe and breathe.
If we must do any amendments, it's for us to have a concerted effort to pass Part 3, the Bill of Rights, which failed in the last attempt. And polish up one or two things. If it's, I'm hoping, I read today in the press that this is not true. I'm hoping that this is not a serious debate about extending the term. Yeah, because certainly that's not a big issue at the moment, and we must. I've seen nothing wrong with the 5-year term. Historically, it's worked very well. If I'm not mistaken,
do you think there are compelling reasons to amend the constitution currently?
No, I think if we must, as I said, it's the Bill of Rights. Okay. Yeah, I don't see compelling reasons to amend the constitution at the moment. We have more pressing issues. More pressing issues. Perhaps. My view is that we should perfect the execution of the current constitution, the terms of it, respecting it, so that if we ever have future amendments, it would have then perfected the art of being constitutional in our behavior. I think that would be more important for me.
So what is clear is we have a document, but we are failing on respecting it.
Correct. Correct. And
constitutional office holders are disrespecting the document.
Completely.
Or disregarding it.
True. If you remember, I'll give you a perfect example of how this constitution can be disrespected even if it's good. The constitution had a clear provision that upon an opponent filing a challenge against the incumbent, the speaker takes over.
As president.
As president. We, myself, Robert Smith and John Sangwa, were the lead counsel for the current president against former President Edgar Lungu. The challenge was filed into court and nothing happened. We filed a case before the Constitutional Court to try and compel the speaker to act. Nothing happened. So you see, the Constitution is just as good as its enforcement. And that's what we must be, I think, focusing on right now.
And the judiciary appear in complicity with the executive, like in that case.
Yeah.
You take a matter for interpretation, for the speaker to take over, or for the court to determine if that is the way you understand it. And the matter is just left in abeyance.
Up to now, we haven't had a judgment. No, but yeah, there are some very good judges on the bench. You know, the judiciary in Zambia, surprisingly, even under the one-party state, passed some excellent judgments against President Kaunda at the time, who was very, very powerful, as you are aware. So at very critical times in this country, and that's why I'm so proud to be a lawyer. At every critical time in this country, every time, there is always lawyers or a lawyer that rises up to stand for what is right. And that was no different during the one-party state. At every time when a president has veered a bit away, it is usually lawyers or a lawyer, and judges are no exception. I remember myself when, during the famous state term in 2001, myself and the current speaker went before Judge, I think it was Gregory Piri at the time, to get a judgment that district commissioners were public servants and could not campaign for the ruling party at that time. Remember the famous time of Joshua Mutisa?
Yes.
The young people don't know those things.
Yes,
but,
Joshua Mutisa from Undola.
Yes. So we went and got an order. So the judiciary has stood up. Have we got problems? Yes. There are concerns about some of the judgments we see and some of the behavior. But one thing I do know is that the vast majority of judges on the bench properly conduct themselves. And like anywhere else, you have a few bad eggs. And the judiciary itself is the first to acknowledge that. If you remember, Justice Chiwesakunda acknowledged that there are a few bad eggs, but the vast majority do have.
No, the current Chief Justice, Honorable Mwamba Malila, held an inauguration. You remember his famous speech, I think widely circulated. First, he admitted the rot in the judiciary. He accepted that sometimes autonomy is compromised. He accepted corruption. He accepted that sometimes there are people that want to please the executive. So for me, I would like to hold him accountable to those lofty, rich words he said in his inauguration speech, because he diagnosed the sickness of the judiciary. And he should be part of the solution to the crisis of the judiciary. So clearly there is a problem, but it's how we do it. Yeah, and as a lawyer, I think you have a duty to be respectful to the judiciary. And you have eternal hope. It's self-correcting and it will correct itself.
No, it will. And also because I know the current Chief Justice. As you know, when I was Solicitor General, he was the Attorney General. Yeah, and I have no doubt that he's a man of integrity. Yeah, whether he's being failed by colleagues here and there, maybe. But he himself, I have no doubt that the Chief Justice is a person of integrity, and that is a person who believes everything that he delivered in that speech. And who, if it was entirely up to him, he would get that done. Whether he's being failed by one or two people, is the thing that we should debate. But he himself, I have not seen any judgment that he has passed that goes against those principles.
Okay.
Yeah, so
to that extent. Thank you for vouching for
No, I would vouch
him.
for him any day.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
As last president, what do you remember most that you achieved?
Well, we started the modernization of LAS. I'll tell you that in my time, and it started when I was honorary secretary, every LAS certificate, practicing certificate, was being drawn by hand. Did you know that?
No.
We actually had an artist coming to draw it. So the current practicing certificates that you see in every office of a lawyer, I designed them.
Okay.
And we started modernizing it to have this printed quickly, because sometimes it would take a month to churn out these practicing.
Hand-drawn.
Hand-drawn. Every name was handwritten and so on. Yeah. So we said it's about time to move away from there, and we started the modernization process. The current LAS house that you see.
The beautiful building there.
It started when Kafula Mwicho was my honorary treasurer, and James Banda was my vice president.
Yeah.
And that's when that started, and we started the process of planning, the designing, and the project started at that stage. And I'm glad that they've finally finished it, the current executives.
Let me move you to when you were Attorney General, because you are part of the epoch that happened in 2014. President Michael Sata dies. You are Attorney General. And earlier there was an issue. The president is unwell. I think the insiders knew. You're probably one of those insiders who knew that the president was unwell. And what happens if he dies? Guy Scott never acted the entire time President Michael Sata was president. And people said he cannot act on that moral perspective. And President Michael Sata would leave either GBM, Alexander Chikwanda, Edgar Lungu, or Winter Kabimba to act as president. But let's start from the night he dies. And how did we arrive at the decision who should act? Because President Michael Sata was in London, he dies in London. There's an acting president who is Edgar Lungu. And you as principal legal advisor, you speak to those facts.
Let me go a bit further back. Michael Sata was an acquired taste for me. Initially, I had a lot of questions about the man. But he had this uncanny way of reinventing himself. And to be honest with you, I have never met a person with that much charisma. And I've met quite a few presidents. I have never met, he was very unorthodox in most of the things he did, but he had a lot of charisma. Now, the time he approached me, because someone called me and said, no, can you come to Pamosi Hotel? A good friend of mine who I won't embarrass by mentioning him here.
Yes.
He says, come to Pamosi Hotel. I drove there, he says, jump into my car. The next thing I was in the presidential library and I was being told, no, are you able to join my administration? And initially I was being asked.
So President Michael Sata headhunted you?
He headhunted me.
Yeah.
And what I respected about him, he spoke to me before I accepted.
Yeah.
And in his usual way, he says, I want you to be PS. I said, no, sir, I'm not an administrator. I'm a lawyer. He said, no, you're a politician.
All those last presidents.
My activism. He says, I'm a politician. Then he says, okay, that's when we discussed the issue of becoming Solicitor General.
Okay.
And I told him that I'm a very forthright person, and if he can respect that, I'm able to serve. Now, 15th October, he gives me the letter of appointment. Myself, James Banda, State Counsel Elijah Banda, and our spouses. I think I had traveled with my spouse, and the two gentlemen, I think, may not have been with their spouses.
15th October 2011.
2011,
yeah.
We traveled to the International Bar Association conference in Dubai as last president, myself, and James as vice. You recall that he appointed a former high-ranking official who had been convicted of corruption, if you recall that, as PS Rapopola. Yeah, you remember that. And then I said, I'm issuing a statement. James, my good friend, says, no, you can't do that. He's appointed you. Do you think it's wise? I said, no, James, I'm going to issue the statement.
Oh, he had appointed you.
He had given me the letter. I had it in my pocket.
Wow.
I issued a full front page statement in which I called the decision completely irresponsible and that it was irresponsible for the president to appoint someone as a controlling officer when he had been convicted of breaching public trust. Now, for me, that was the big test if he could work with me. Because I'm not a good sycophant.
Yeah.
I just don't make a good sycophant. So I remember that one of the State House officials just told me the only thing he said was, he never mentioned it to me.
And he never revoked your letter of appointment.
Never revoked the letter of appointment. He reversed his decision.
Yeah.
And then saw me in. After swearing me in, he took me to the reception. And told them this man requires no appointment to see me.
Wow.
I need him to advise me whenever he feels he can advise me. He gained my respect.
So like Levi Mwanawasa, Sata was amenable to advice.
He was amenable to advice and he was a very strange person. He taught me the difference between personality and character.
Explain.
His personality was very brash. What you saw, he was very brash. But he was very soft in terms of character and kind. But also, he was fascinated by strong people. He liked strong people around him. And he didn't respect weakness. So I at every point, you push back. I remember one time we were seated in the office and we were talking about something. I said, no, sir, you didn't appoint me to come and do things like that. And if it's like that, maybe just let me go. Wow. He looked at me and says, go and do your job. So now coming to his death, and that's how I committed. I said, look, I can work with this person.
Because he's respecting your views, he's somehow taking your advice.
Yes, and it doesn't...
And he's not offended.
By criticism.
Yeah, by criticism.
Correct.
For example, few presidents would have taken the harsh criticism you put out in that Post newspaper that day.
Yeah, it was front page, you remember
Yes.
It was front page news and in October that year. So after that, and throughout the 3 years I worked with him, he even went on to appoint me as Attorney General.
Yes.
The only time he didn't listen to advice from me was once. I can't go into the details. But that time he didn't. And that's the only time. Otherwise, every single time I went in, I would advise the man and he would listen. And you know how Michael Sata was. He would say, Kalembe. Kalembe, yeah. Now, coming to the death of the president, you know...
Where were you when it occurred and how did you know?
I was at my sister-in-law's funeral and we were about to bury the next day. So I was about to go home to rest. And then I got a phone call from George Chela from London. And he said, Deji, the president has died. You know that now you are critical.
Yeah.
It was the longest night. It's the first time in my life that I didn't sleep a wink for 48 hours.
For 48 hours?
48 hours. I didn't sleep a wink. You know, it was adrenaline upon adrenaline and very interesting. I remember sitting in Guy Scott's sitting room, myself, Mr. Chenda, Honorable Chenda, Dr. Guy Scott, who was vice president at that time, and their spouses.
Yeah.
I was alone. And the three of us made a pact to do the right thing, even if it meant we die. It was a very solemn time.
Okay,
Then we scrambled jets to pick up...
Secretary to Cabinet.
To Cabinet from Livingston, if you remember.
Dr. Roland Musiska, yes.
Dr. Musiska was flown in, and at 3 a.m., I was waiting for him at City Airport there. I remember we went to his office, and we looked at each other. And I said, Vamdala, 10 to Pepe. So we prayed, and then got on to doing the right thing. Around 6,
Did it occur to you that in the event that the president died, the person to act would be Guy Scott?
Yes.
Had you simulated it, had you discussed it, and did you recognize, because the political environment, of course, didn't appear that it would allow, whatever the Constitution says, it would allow Guy Scott to act as president?
I was fully aware.
Okay.
That the Constitution required that the Vice President act. Even if the Constitution has changed, I remember it so vividly that it was Article 38. Yeah, and the law was clear. Previously, even before the current CJ left as Attorney General,
yes.
to become Supreme Court judge, we had advised the President then that it was wrong to appoint anyone other than the Vice President to act. Okay. So all those appointments were technically observing the Constitution in default. Yeah, so in breach, sorry. So we put that that advice on record. So we knew who was to act and what the Constitution said. So when I walked in, and Dr. Guy Scott writes this in his book. When I walked in, I called him Your Excellency. He looked at me and says, what do you mean? I said, the second your brother breathed his last breath, you became president of this country. What Dr. Scott told me, he said, Musa, I don't want to fight. These are my family. I said to him, sir, do you have a pen and a paper? He looked at me and said, for what? I said, I want to resign. Because I don't want to take part in an unconstitutional exchange of power. Because that would be a coup d'etat, and I don't want to be part of that. So he says, no, but I've been invited to a cabinet meeting tomorrow where
the acting president, president had invited him.
In fact, the defense minister at that time and minister of justice.
Who was acting president?
Who was the acting president when President Sata left.
Yes.
But at the time that the president died, his acting presidency ended because the law said upon the death of the president, the vice president becomes president. So by operation of law, there was no need for an instrument. By operation of law at that time, the then acting president, who was defense minister, the former president, Dr. Edgar Lungu, stopped acting at that point. But he had invited Dr. Guy Scott,
vice president, who should have been acting president.
Yes, for a meeting. So I said, well, if you want to go there as simply a member, I need to resign. I can't be part of that. He said,
so you prevented him from coming to that
I meeting? Say, yes. She said, what do I do? I said, stay in this house until I tell you to leave. I'm not going to be part. If you want to do those things, you and your colleagues, I would rather resign and leave you to do the things. So he looked at me, he said, do you know that that would be a disservice to this country and also to my late friend? I said, well, then let's do the right thing. You people can decide whatever you do after that. But I will observe the law to the letter. And that's what I would
in that cabinet meeting, there are a lot of witnesses because it was a cabinet meeting. And the testimonies of how combative you were and that you called it illegal and treason. Just confirm those views.
No, I think there is you can't. I think there's been a confusion between what's the word you use? That how combative?
Combative.
No,
or maybe that's how assertive you were.
No, I was firm.
Oh, you were firm. Okay.
Yeah, I was firm. I can talk about that meeting because it wasn't a cabinet meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, the first meting. Yeah. The second one was a cabinet.
Oh yeah, as you have explained.
That was not a cabinet meeting because we walked there. First of all, the late Dr. Msiska called one of the senior ministers that time, and we were told, where are you? We're in a cabinet meeting. So the secretary to the cabinet said, but how can you have a cabinet meeting without me?
I'm the secretary.
Cabinet office didn't call that meting, and the Attorney General is here with me. So we were summoned to State House. When I got there, of course, I found the then Minister of Defense in the chair. And we settled in. You know how we sit in cabinet. The Attorney General sits at the foot, and then the Secretary to the cabinet sits behind. So one of the cabinet ministers looked back and asked Dr. Msiska, are you recording the minutes? He got up and said, I can't, sir, until the Attorney General tells me to. So that's when they looked at me and said, what is your opinion? And I gave my opinion very, very clearly. I said, look, this is not a cabinet meeting. They said, why? There's so much raucous. I said, because the only provision in the Constitution which talks about cabinet meetings says only the president or the vice president chairs the cabinet meeting. I don't see any president here because
vice president.
And I don't see the vice president. So there was this back and forth, let's take who should act and so on. Well, I gave my opinion very firmly. And I said, I remember, let's get a second opinion. And I said, unfortunately for you, I know I'm not going to be long in this position that I hold. But for now, I'm the only Attorney General you have. And that is my opinion. And I stood my ground, and I think they finally acceded to the opinion. And afterwards, they said, so how can we have a cabinet meeting? I said, Dr. Guy Scott has to come and chair it. They said, okay, let's do that. That's when I called him. I said, you can now leave your house and come and chair the cabinet meeting. So those were the events of that night. So the cabinet meeting...
I was bothering to go to that event to demonstrate that you've stood up to principle, even at the threat of loss of a job or threat of on your life, and you've stood firm, and it didn't matter which powers they were. That cabinet, Michael Sata's cabinet, was very, very strong cabinet, or very strong-headed politicians.
Right.
And a professional like you to have stood up and do what you did is highly commendable. Yeah, that's why I bothered to go into that particular details.
Of course, I was fired.
Subsequently, yes.
Yeah. In January 2015, I knew I was leaving, and it became uncomfortable. Then I'll tell you a little secret.
Yeah.
How I triggered my own firing, because the inauguration was on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, look, I'm not going to be comfortable in this setting, because I know that I gave my opinion, and people, unless there is a reset and people say we will abide by the Constitution and we'll do what is right. So what I did, I went to a minister who I thought talks to the president a lot.
Very often.
Yeah, and who I knew would convey the message. We convey messages in different ways. So I went to him, I said, you know what? You know me. And you know what I said was the correct thing.
Yeah.
I said, look, unless His Excellency, the President now, who has just been elected, calls me and tells me I was right. And that, he knows that I will resign my position. I think it's better just push in my resignation, and I think that's the best thing. He says, no, I'm seeing him, don't be rash. I was fired that day in the afternoon.
Wow.
So I happily went back to my law practice and had a clear conscience.
I see. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. 2021, in the run-up to the elections, you're one of those strong voices.
Now let me cut you short. And this is one of the reasons I'm sitting with you here, and you've jumped important information that includes you.
Oh, yes.
Following my departure from government, I went on a bit of a hiatus, and you became ambassador, if you
in South Africa, yes.
In South Africa. Twice I met you. At Tambo Airport. And you said to me, and I've never forgotten this.
What did I say?
You said to me, you are a very important voice. Yeah. And you've always been an activist and very strong. Don't stop talking. Yeah. Continue speaking truth to power. And you twice we met, space of months. Yes. And you said, no, don't stop talking. Continue raising your voice and talking very strong, and I've never forgotten. Yeah.
No, I remember you were going to London. I think you were pursuing a matter in court in London at the time.
Yes.
And I met you twice, and you were very quiet during that period.
Yeah.
But I said, our country, it doesn't matter which aisle you are.
Yeah.
Whether you're in the ruling party or in opposition, there should be a voice that speaks truth to power.
Right.
And such a voice must not be stilled or corrupted.
Right.
So I'm a firm believer in that even when we are inside, we should do our best, I think, to speak truth to power.
Right.
And truth is not popular.
True.
Truth in many cases is painful.
Right.
And many people want to ignore truth And when you say it, they actually even become hostile.
Absolutely.
So I've always encouraged, and a luminary voice like yours, who had been speaking, look, you were honorary secretary in 2001. Mm-hmm. You know, this is 15 years later. Why should you keep quiet?
Right.
Even now, State Council, I don't expect you to keep quiet.
Right.
For the sake of our country. You were SEC board chair. Mm-hmm. You still spoke uncomfortable truth to power. Mm-hmm. And we'll come back to that shortly, because that's an interesting piece for our people. Mm-hmm. So I was highlighting that you, John Sangwa, Brebna Changal, and others became very strong voice against the government of President Hakainde Hichilema, against President Edgar Lungu in the run-up to the elections. And we saw you were appointed as a board chair of SEC. Just speak to that, like you did to the position of Solicitor General and Attorney General.
Yeah. No, what people don't know is when I was approached, I was asked whether I would like to be, whether I can help in the position of DPP. I had conversations. Mm-hmm. And also Director General of the Anti-Corruption Commission, and I declined. Mm. I said I'm not available for a full-time appointment. I'm only available for a part-time appointment because I'm still a legal practitioner, and the last time I went into full-time government work, I actually lost money. Yeah. Because I'm not a thief, I'm not corrupt. So the next time I go into full-time government service, I'll be retiring from public practice. So I declined any full-time appointment. And when I was asked whether I could be chairperson, I said I can help because it's non-executive and it's part-time. So I was glad to help. And initially
But with your fight against corruption, with your dedication to this country, didn't you think that the position of DPP or even Director General of SEC would have been more suitable for you?
The thing is, I've always been a firm believer that you don't go there to seek the job, it's to serve. Okay. And for me, if it's service, the first time I went into government, I didn't move out of my house. You know, I built my house when I was just 27. That's the same house I live in up to now. So I never moved out of my house. I never got rid of my security at home, my personal security. The sentry who was guarding me just came and started sitting with my own guard. I never got rid of my driver at the time. And I never changed my personal circumstances simply because I believe government service is just that. It's service. It's not for me to go and become rich there or to make money. So to go into government service knowing that I'm not yet ready to retire would have been a disservice because both those positions have so much security of tenure that it's actually a retirement job. You see, a DPP can just
walk out of the job.
Yes, the Attorney General and Solicitor General are tied to the cycle of the presidency, the tenure of the presidency.
Or from the 2016 elections?
From the 2016 constitution, when the current president, the current term ends, the Solicitor General and the Attorney General also lose their jobs. That's how the constitution.
You know why I asked that? Is when I was wondering why you lost your job in 2015, I was trying to understand, was this cycle there before?
No.
It wasn't there before.
It wasn't there before.
Now it's automatic.
Now it's automatic. Then in the 1991 Constitution, or is it?
As amended in 1996.
As amended in 1996, there was no limit you could stay on. That's why after President Mwanawasa died and President Rupia Banda became president, for some time, the current CJ continued as Attorney General, if you remember.
Yes.
So, so because of that security of tenure, I couldn't see myself staying there until I retire. So I'm more comfortable in my law firm. Although people may have misunderstood this appointment that it gave us a lot of money. We sat on scheduled meeting once every 3 months.
Yeah. I think every board meeting.
Every board meeting. But the people are entitled to know that my sitting allowance was 2,500 kwacha.
So in 3 months from the SEC, you'd earn 2,000.
2,500 kwacha unless there are emergency meetings. And then I got an honorary...
Are there fringe benefits?
No, well,
security?
No security, nothing, no driver.
Are you entitled to a vehicle?
Nothing, zero, no car. That's why I hear people make pedestrian comments, and the only other scheduled thing that you get is an honorarium of 25,000 kwacha every 3 months. So in total scheduled payments per month
is 27,500.
No, per month is 9,100 kwacha.
Per month, yeah.
9,000 kwacha, nothing else. The only thing is when you travel, of course, you know how government is. They'll buy the ticket and so on. Yeah. So if there is any expense that looks huge, it's because the ticket has been bought. But my day-to-day, the people are entitled to know, it was 9,000 kwacha 100 per month, if you aggregate it.
Because no it's a part-time job.
It's a part-time job and it's service. It's service. Even as Attorney General, I don't think I got a net of more than 35,000 kwacha at that time. You see? So even allowances, no one should lie that allowances, this and that. I mean, when you travel to Geneva, you and I know, or Angola, I would have to dip into my pocket to subsidize the government. Yeah. If I wanted to get
Angola, where accommodation is $500
yes, a night. Geneva, yes. So the long and short is...
No, I think that's good to set ground. Because people think all these positions are very lucrative.
No.
And in many cases, I used to find appointees get troubled.
Yeah.
For example, you're appointed as board chair at ZESCO, and you want a 4x4.
Yes.
You want your rent
exactly.
paid, and you want your children's school fees to be paid.
Right.
No, you're not the director general. You are not the managing director.
Right.
You are a board member.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think even appointees, many of them would be surprised that there is no money.
There's
in the positions that they're appointed.
There's nothing. Even going to meetings, the people at SEC are there. At some point, because they would send a driver to pick you up. Many times I would drive myself there in my car with my fuel, drive to meetings, and many of the meetings would have them without any allowance because we made up our mind as a board that money should not be a hindrance to doing the job. Yeah, so it's a total of all the insults for 9,100 kwacha per month. So you know that in law practice, State Council...
That's hourly fee. Something you earn in a day or two.
Yes, so I think at the end of the day, but that is not regretted because we must save our nation.
It's for service.
It's for service.
In fact, that's what brings me to this momentous period. Dr. O'Brien Kaba, an academic, UNZA law lecturer, an activist in his own right, I think wrote one of the most momentous letters we've ever seen because it triggered the resignation of the Director General of SEC. It triggered the dissolution of your board. It triggered announcements that the Solicitor General was under probe. So many things happened in a period of 1 week. But walk us back to SEC. What was wrong and what did you find troubling?
Yeah, I think we had a disconnect. We had two eras. There was the time when the current DPP was our DG, and then later on we had a new DG. And I think we worked very well in the initial period. The initial era was very optimistic. It was very upbeat. The second bit, we had a bit of...
Gilbert Peary, as Director General, and the board, you worked in sync.
We worked in sync. We had a few problems, but generally we were a team. We would work, Gilbert would consult, because he knew I had served in government. So it was his first stint in government, and he would consult. He was very consultative. He always briefed the board. He had detailed briefings with myself, and from time to time. So we worked very well together, and we were moving along. But I think when the new DG came, he felt that he didn't have to brief the board. He didn't have to interact with ourselves, and we completely were at some point cut off, despite several resolutions to ask for briefings. And
sometimes we should understand from just initial appointment It's not that I want to discuss DG in person. When he was appointed as Human Rights Commissioner first, before he came to ACC, some of us raised concern. And when he was appointed as Director General and the matter went for ratification, our members of parliament from Patriotic Front raised concern who were in the committee, the select committee. And to my knowledge, I think even Lars objected to his appointment as Director General. Why would the executive ignore the alarm bells that were ringing just at appointment level? I don't know to what extent you can discuss that.
No, I can't second guess them. Yeah, but what I just do know is that it's vitally important that in appointing persons in those offices, the strongest and most independent people are looked at. I think that there are lessons to be learned from what has happened, big lessons, and the hope is that we will not make the same mistakes going forward.
The country, besides its various crises, legacy issues, poverty, unemployment, disease burden, and then the new issues, cost of living crisis, load shedding, the current hunger affecting over 6.8 million people. We have various crises. But on top of that list is something that doesn't seem to go away. Mm-hmm. Corruption.
Yeah.
And you're privileged to have been board chair of the Anti-Corruption Commission. Did you hope you could change this scenario of corruption, especially the looting of the treasury?
Yeah. You see, I've always held the view that it's a hopeless task to even attempt to develop this country without first tackling corruption. Yeah. We must stop the leakages. And this is a non-partisan issue. It's really because, you see, you and I may belong to X political party and Y political party, but when money is stolen, it is yours and my money. You see? And those, many times when these people steal money, they don't even share with the poor people. But the poor people will be tossed here and there with regards to party regalia. It's a non-partisan issue. And if we are truly, truly interested in the development of this country, we must insist that the fight against corruption must be done in a non-partisan way. You see, so I was hopeful that we would do that. If you recall, at every point I could speak, I would say we must fight past, present, and future corruption. And we had several resolutions as a board, because you see, the power of the board is just to give general specific directives. And we did give those, and on fighting corruption in a non-partisan way. Repeatedly, we gave directives and passed resolution on how that can be done. To our disappointment, of course, it's now public knowledge from Dr. Kaba's write-ups that the board was very unhappy with the way the corruption fight was being done, in that 3 years down the line, or almost 3 years down the line, we were not seeing any major movements in cases of current corruption. That was very clear. And we made it extremely clear, and we communicated wherever we could communicate about our concerns in that regard.
The recently released Financial Intelligence Center's trends report, I think, does put in very stark contrast. It says our corruption fight, I think, could be failing because the suspicious transactions have risen from 2019, when it was 2 billion, it's now 13.5 billion. And the FIC have stated that reports to law enforcement agencies like the SEC actually have detailed cases, names mentioned, transactions mentioned, banks involved, and the particular reported transactions. So in fact, by the time the cases are with the law enforcement agencies, they've done the legwork for you. You even know who to call. You even know who to approach. So how could corruption rise during a president who pledged that would end corruption, during a president who said he would leave institutions like yours to fight corruption without interference?
Right. Oh, look, I can speak authoritatively about what was happening in the commission.
Yeah.
And what was clear is that we were not dealing, the operation of people, the people who had the power to arrest and investigate, were not dealing with current corruption. And we made it very clear that investigating corruption is not enough. Because you can investigate for 7 years. There must be a movement towards arrest, towards prosecution. And those who appoint these people must also move to remove them. Because we know that it was done. I can speak for when I was myself Solicitor General and then Attorney General during the late President Michael Sata's reign in power. He was there for 3 years, and we know that at least 3 ministers were fired. They were investigated, they were dismissed, they were arrested, they were prosecuted, all in 3 years. There was at least 3 permanent secretaries, 2 at cabinet office, who suffered the same fate. So it is possible to do this within this time frame. We're not saying you finish the prosecution. We are saying you start the prosecution. But we didn't do that. Now, sometimes failure to do that by people who have the power to do those things is what leads to what we are seeing in the FIC report. Because there's no deterrent. And by the time you want to deal with it, it's now completely out of control. You know, and we made it known through and through in the 2 years that we were there. I mean, the last 1 year was, if you know, the corruption perception index increased because of the optimism that we had in the first year, and also the efforts that we made in that year. In the last 1 year, it's been quite unhappy, I must say.
And I think the report, the perception index report, will show next year, because it's usually behind. At the launch, you and Dr. Kaba were at Mulungushi when the president came. There appeared to be an easy marriage between the 3 of you. You, Tom, and the president. I don't know what was happening.
Which launch?
The president was at Mulungushi International Conference.
The launch of the anti-corruption policy.
I think it's the anti-corruption policy. You had the full packed house, cooperating partners, and the president came. And the president even made some remarks that if you're not willing to do the job, leave the job. You were appointed to do the job, and he appeared to be looking at the 2 of you.
No. He made, in fact, he said DG.
Yeah. Oh,
so
he mentioned it.
He mentioned the DG. I wasn't sitting at the podium that day, and there is a backstory to that. I wasn't sitting on the podium, and the DG was the one at the podium.
What happened?
So I mean, that was in all the papers. I mean, he looked and he addressed the DG. Yeah, but with regards to myself, to be honest with you, I'm not one to distort facts. There was no uneasiness between me and the president.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no. We walked together for 200 meters, but I know that officials at the Ministry of Justice deliberately created a problem. And I will explain to you.
Because you as board chair, why were you not at the table?
Exactly. So
why would your functionary be at the table?
And I'm quite certain the president wasn't aware of what was happening. But if you recall, that policy was supposed to be launched on the 28th of March.
Yeah.
15th of March, I received an invitation to speak, and I was given a draft speech. 28th, 10 days later. No. The launch was supposed to be 10 days later on the 28th. I received my speech on the 15th. On the 18th, I spoke at the International Africa Anti-Corruption Conference at the Intercontinental Hotel, where the Transparency International officials were in the country, and there was delegates from all over Africa. And that's the day I spoke very, very loudly that I don't agree with the policy of asset recovery only. It can't fight corruption. Yeah. And I made my views very openly known. The policy was, the launch was postponed indefinitely after that. Okay, I didn't know that what I said was unpopular or
State
unwelcome.
Council, you had created uneasiness in the executive. At every forum, you demanded that the president must declare his assets. And you just didn't say the president. Other state officials, especially those holding constitutional office, you rendered, I think, to a demand by everyone that the president must make his assets, liabilities, business interests public.
In fairness, I was demanding that all public officials.
Yes.
I didn't zero in on the president. But what happened on that day was so that was postponed indefinitely.
Yeah.
The launch was done on the 17th of May. I only learned that there was a launch on the 15th of May. Someone from TI told me, "Are you coming?" From Transparency International. I said, "Coming to what?" Says there's a launch. So I called our ACC office and said, "But my speech, I'm told there's a meeting." It says the information I got from there, the long and short, is that Ministry of Justice has directed that you be removed from the program.
My God, my God.
So I was removed from the program, but I still went because a policy is a matter for the board.
Yeah.
And as head of the board, I can't stay away. So I still went to the meeting because I couldn't disrespect the head of state by not being there.
Whatever the political fight was going on underneath there.
Yeah, that's why I say I could see that certainly the head of state didn't know that. I don't know why officials at Ministry of Justice did that. I have no idea. But perhaps it's some of the strong stances we've taken. And looking at O'Brien's comments, they seemed to have shown that maybe there was one or two issues between the board and some officials in the ministry. But that's what happened.
So we noted that because everyone who has worked in government would know that that was your function. You should have been at the high table. You were not. And that's the uneasiness I talk about.
Yeah, but
the road that has emerged, like Dr. O'Brien's letter, Kaba's letter, says that literally the fight against corruption is dead. The high-flying fight that the president had declared is totally dead. In fact, the corruption is so systemic, it affects all wings of government and to some extent perpetrated by state institutions such as state chambers, attorney generals' chambers, DPP's chambers, and others. Like I said, the letter was so momentous. People are asking that why did you attempt to probably see the president or the Minister of Justice when you found the inadequacies in the DG, where he was disregarding your directives, where he was disobeying your orders as a board?
No, I can rest assure you that everything was done to communicate effectively, and we communicated effectively. Of course, I can't go into the details, but rest assured that everything was done to communicate effectively.
Okay.
Yeah, that was done.
You did your part as a board.
We did our part. We communicated extremely effectively, and the message was sent.
Okay.
And unfortunately, perhaps we didn't get what we were supposed to get in terms of action, but the communication was done very effectively.
Was resignation on your card? Did the frustration sometimes come so much and say,
of course,
maybe I've made my name for the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Isn't my name?
In fact, you are being diplomatic. Some people have asked, why didn't you resign? Yeah. So to answer, I mean, you've worked in government before. I've always said, you don't resign at the slightest hint of challenges. As a patriot and a public servant, you don't run. You stay and fight within. I did the same when the famous Guy Scott handover of power. You know that period I was very unpopular within the ruling party.
Yeah.
And the presidential candidate there was President Edgar Lungu. And basically, I went to the office every day. I remember, I can recount this. I went to the office as Attorney General every day. And essentially, cadres were guarding every entrance of Ministry of Justice. But I still got up and went to the office every single day. When the police were overrun in our ministry, don't forget the presidential candidate who I had opposed to take over as acting president was Minister of Justice. Yes. When I was Attorney General.
He was your minister.
He was my minister, and I made a decision, and I never ran away. Every morning I got up, I went, I saved my country, and walked past cadres who were very antagonistic to me. I don't run away. Okay, I stayed. The same in this instance. I won't run at the slightest hint of challenges. I will stay there and do the right thing internally, and I'll do what needs to be done. Now, if we were to argue that resignation should always be the first thing, of course, as a human being, you think about it sometimes. The problem with that is that you give up. If every good person in government said that, no, I'm fed up, I'm resigning, what you would do then is you hand over you leave the whole government to the vouchers. So we must say the good police officers should stay in the police. The good people at Ministry of Justice, don't run away. Stay there and do the right thing. The good people who I know are many within the ACC should remain there and do the right thing. That's what we did.
Fight a good fight.
Well, that's what we did, because we had a good 1 year. Then we were having a bad next year where we were disappointed.
Yes.
Our hope was that since this thing was tilted on a few individuals, we could resolve that and bring the institution back online. Of course, had it persisted, I think I would have been persuaded to consider that option you've talked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How best can we run the Anti-Corruption Commission? The people have done their best.
True.
First of all, they ensure that the board chair and his board members are of high integrity. In fact, all your predecessors have been judges.
Yes. True.
They ensure that they give you security of tenure.
No, we don't have.
For the Director General.
Just for the Director General. And in fact, that law is myself and the current CJ who worked on that law to give the Director General security of tenure.
So why would people then fear ministers if you have security of tenure? You are ratified by Parliament. Why would you fear a permanent secretary? Why would you fear the powers?
That's why it's important to have people of backbone in those institutions. The law is not enough. The law must be worked on, enforced by people of backbone. It's not enough to just have a good law. We must also appoint people of strength, proven track record in some of these things. You remember that even under late President Mwanawasa, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Nixon Banda faced huge challenges.
Yeah.
We had to issue a statement ourselves. When the current Judge William Mwamba was president of LAS, I was in the council. You know, we had to issue a statement to protect him. You see? But later on, we had another DG who there were serious challenges within the Anti-Corruption Commission during that time. So I think, and the law was the same. Mr. Banda stood his ground. So the subsequent person under the same law had difficulties. We need to be very, very conscious that people of backbone, we must vet people and get people who know how to say no. Who know how to say no, that I can't do, and I'm going to do the right thing. That's very important. That institution needs men and women, not boys and girls.
The forfeiture of proceeds of Crime Act of 2010 and the amendment that were done to the SEC in 2012 all arise from the earlier fight against corruption that was done by President Levi Mwanawasa. There was a recognition that there was no law providing for forfeiture of proceeds that were deemed to be associated with crime. In fact, the old law then required that you could only forfeit the assets that are surprising. If a conviction was obtained.
Yeah.
But this new law that was done in 2010 appears to allow for negotiations, a matter now that you condemn. Maybe it's a transplant of laws. You know, we think that a good law from somewhere is good and it should be implemented. Where is that law? Where is it a problem? Because people have written about it that it's abusing rights to property, that on mere suspicion of a police officer or an SEC officer or a DEC officer, your properties are being seized, and that it is undermining the right to property. Wouldn't it be proper that assets should be seized upon conviction?
Right. No, I think it's not a bad law.
Okay.
That law arises from, I think the initial place where it was implemented was the US.
Yeah.
And that law targets tainted property. I'll tell you where it operates. I'll give you a typical example of the proper operation of that law. If, for example, there was a drug deal going down at Manda Hill, and then there's a boot full of $2 million, okay? If the DEC pounds at that place and all the criminals run away, you don't get anyone, but you have $2 million.
Yeah.
What then do you do with it? That law is meant to go after tainted property without a body to attach to it.
Okay, okay.
Okay? So it is a useful law, but in fighting corruption, it can't be the only mechanism. And I'll give you the reason why I say so. So it goes after tainted property. So meaning you can proceed against a property and prove that it's tainted. You still have to prove that it's tainted. And then use it to forfeit to the state. Now, in terms of agreements with individuals, that is where I have a problem. If you are going to fight corruption, don't fight corruption only by saying to me, bring back 2 million kwacha, you stole 4 million. Bring back 2 million. Or if I stole 4 million and then I bring back the whole 4 million and then I go away. The question is, that money was never mine in the first place. By giving it back to you, how am I deterred from getting the other 4 million?
The agreements that have taken place under that law, did you approve as a board?
No. We didn't even know of some of them.
Okay.
As I said, we were not operationally briefed for a year.
Wow.
We had no operational briefing. I had no, because the previous practice was to have a general briefing as a board and for the chair to be specifically briefed.
Okay.
Yeah, the new CEO decided that he was not comfortable to give any briefing to the board.
Was that within the law or he was abusing the law?
Look, there is nothing in the law that prevents him from taking discretion in certain matters. But certainly, we have the power, we had the power as a board to give specific and general directives. And so to that extent, corporate governance requires that you have, the principal business of the Anti-Corruption Commission is to fight corruption.
Yes, yes.
So to think that you cannot brief your board about the principal business defies logic by any standards. But anyway, so that is what has happened. It's water under the bridge. But with regards to my views, you cannot fight corruption by simply obtaining that these agreements. That's the first thing. The second thing is because simply it's better if you don't have evidence, you drop the case.
Yeah.
If you have evidence, you pursue it. If your evidence is weak, don't enter into agreements. Do a plea bargain. That's my view.
What's the difference?
The difference is because an agreement whitewashes people. A plea bargain, someone pleads guilty and then you don't send them to prison.
Okay. Okay.
Now, a criminal conviction is important because the law says that the convict or this person cannot serve in public office for 5 years or stand as an
employee. Available for certain things.
Yes.
Okay.
So at least it's some measure of punishment. That's if we are serious about fighting corruption. If we are not serious, let's just be honest and say we are not serious. This whitewashing is not good.
Yeah.
But if we say as a country, not political parties, not government, not opposition, if we say as a country that it's important that we fight corruption, we must be serious with it. We say When you have there is sufficient evidence, there should be a plea bargain, and then you say you are not going to go to prison. If there is no evidence and it's a difficult question, it's another issue altogether. So that's my firm belief, and that's the only way we can move. The agreements, yes, they have their place, but as an exception, not the primary role of fighting corruption. Because if I have acquired $1 million from the government, and you get it back from me after 10 years, it's simply the lowest interest loan you would have ever given me. It's if I'm intelligent, I'll turn it over several times, and I think for me that is not the ideal. But finally, on that point, the problem with out-of-court settlements is they themselves become corrupt agreements if you are not careful. Because if I have 40 million kwacha, and then we agree, all of a sudden you see agreements bring back 20, and then some other people are sharing 5, and then the guy remains with 15. So these things are always susceptible to corruption. So we must put railguards to prevent those kind of things.
Wonderful. As we come to the end, I didn't have an opportunity for you to review our presidents, but we are 60 as a country celebrating our Diamond Jubilee. What have we done wrong? What can we do better in the next 60 years?
Yeah. I think what we need now is consistency, and at every point to insist that our presidents match their rhetoric with action. I have been privileged to deal with a few of our presidents and to work with at least 2. Yeah, and I can say without a doubt, and I'm proud of this, that the fight against corruption is so important to the Zambian people. And that's why I'm proud as a Zambian. Don't be fooled. Zambians hate grand corruption. And that is why every one of our presidents, apart from one, has had their legacy formulated by this issue of corruption. It's a very important thing to the Zambian people. You see, so we must always have that in mind. Whoever becomes president must have it front and center, that the legacy of presidents in Zambia, apart from President Kaunda, whose legacy may have been formulated around the liberation of Southern Africa and the development and also democracy. If there was one failing, it was that issue. Yeah. Everyone from there has had their legacy formulated by the fight against corruption.
Or the lack of it.
Or the lack of it. And everyone who wants to get in public office now must know that this is a powder keg. The Zambian people hate grand corruption. And presidents have fallen or stood on this one question. It's a very, very important question. So for me, analyzing all these presidents, I've come to realize, and it gives me great pride, that at our heart as Zambians, we hate grand corruption. And we are all eager to have this country
Do we love small corruption?
Well,
paying at roadblocks, paying at...
That is a complex issue, and one feeds off the other. The problem is the people of this country look at big people in government getting millions of dollars and then condemning them for paying 100 kwacha or getting 100 kwacha to buy bread. If we deal with grand corruption in a consistent and transparent manner, the small man also won't take 100 kwacha. But they are saying, now, why are you stopping me from getting 100 kwacha when you're getting millions of dollars yourselves? So one feeds off the other. And I'm very confident that at grand level, if we are consistent, clear, the people will get it as well. But quite frankly, there's only one word that describes how we've been fighting corruption in recent times: hypocrisy. We are hypocritical because we insist that the small man does the right thing, but the big people are not doing the right thing. We must all do the right thing.
Thank you very much. Honorable Musa Mwenya, State Counsel, former Attorney General, former Solicitor General, former Law Association of Zambia President, and recently former Board Chair of the Anti-Corruption Commission. By the way, I protested the dissolution of your board. You cannot dissolve a board that has acted as whistleblower, that have been crying that we are not being allowed to do our job. So I think your dissolution was totally unfair. And I will not invite your comments on it because you are the one affected by it. But they should have let you with the vision that you had to now work with the new Director General. So I'd like to thank you for sparing your time, valuable time, to come and discuss this important subject, and also to give us an opportunity to profile you, to understand who is Musa Mwenya. So thank you for coming, and you can say your last words.
No, thank you so much. And I think this is the issue of the fight against corruption. I want to reiterate, is a non-partisan issue. It's a Zambian issue. And all of us must hold hands and do the right thing. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our dear viewers, until next time, until we have another guest on our program on Conversation Podcast, God bless you and happy holidays.